Stacey Abrams delivered the Democrats' official response to Trump's State of the Union last night. I gotta be real with you, I was highly disappointed by her speech. Those of you who might not know who Stacey Abrams is, she was the Democratic nominee for the governor's race in Georgia in the 2018 elections. She's a solid progressive. She's dedicated her career to, and her campaign was focused on very important progressive priorities. She started an organization to register African American voters in Georgia, which was a pretty big deal. I believe she got over 100,000 people to register to vote with that organization. She ran such a good campaign because she did not back down from her policy positions. $15 minimum wage, single payer, Medicare for all, free college, expanding voting rights and voter registration. She was on track to be the only African American governor in the country and the first female African American governor. She would have won if her opponent, Brian Kemp, who was also overseeing the entire election across the state, didn't illegally remove hundreds of thousands of voters from the voter registration rolls. A lot of them were signed up by Stacey Abrams' organization. So it was not an accident. All of those people who were overwhelmingly likely to vote for Stacey Abrams were kicked off the voter rolls and not allowed to vote, which led to Brian Kemp winning in such a narrow victory. And I wouldn't even call it a victory, seeing how he brazenly stole the election. It's safe to say Stacey Abrams had her election stolen from her by Brian Kemp, and nobody did anything about it. So allowing her to deliver the official response to Trump's State of the Union wasn't even a bad idea. I was actually kind of excited seeing how last year they picked corporatist establishment Democrat Joe Kennedy to provide the response, and it was terrible. But after watching her speech last night, it appears clear to me that it was either heavily edited by Democratic leadership or they just flat out wrote the speech and gave it to her and allowed her to make some tweaks to it. Now, I make very clear how I feel about the Democratic Party, specifically the leadership and the establishment of the party, on this show every time I get the chance. I think that all progressive politicians need to stop trying to make nice and make friends with the Democratic establishment and the corporate Democrats. I believe in a scorched earth policy. I believe that if Donald Trump and the Republicans are your enemy 97% of the time on policy issues, well, you better be fighting the Democratic establishment and the leadership of the party, the corporatists in the party, at least 85% to 90% of the time, because I guarantee you they're not on the right side of policy positions most of the time. So it makes absolutely no sense. The calculations in my mind never add up to it is the right move to play nice with the Democratic leadership. You will always have a better result if you blast them just as much as you blast the Republicans. But that's not what Stacey Abrams did in her speech. Instead, she kowtowed and did exactly what they wanted her to do. The speech was so hollow and devoid of real policy substance. She spent a large amount of the speech in the beginning introducing herself and telling her whole life story, which normally I cannot stand, and I don't think I'm alone in that. People don't want to hear about your fucking childhood or your dad and your mom and your sister and your brother and your fucking auntie. Voters want to hear the policy substance. What positions are you going to fight for that will make their lives better? So all the personal shit makes me roll my fucking eyes to the back of my head. The part of the speech that really pissed me off the most was when she started talking about healthcare. I've seen her speeches on the campaign trail where she advocates for single-payer Medicare for all. She talked about it, she brought it up in her rallies and in her interviews and stuff like that. But in her response to Trump's State of the Union, it was a completely different message. She didn't mention single-payer not once in her entire speech. Instead, what she did was beat around the bush and say how important it is for Americans to have access to affordable health care. That we should expand Medicare and grow Obamacare. She was really actually using the exact language of corporate Democrats on the issue of health care. So as I'm watching this go down, I'm asking myself, Stacey, why the fuck are you doing this? You don't have to bend to the corporatist establishment demands of the leadership of the Democratic Party. You got popular on your own. You got national coverage on your own by running a progressive campaign. By talking about serious policy substance that's affecting the lives of millions of people across the country and the millions of people in Georgia that you wanted to represent. The leadership of the Democratic Party has no intention of implementing any of the policies that you want to see passed. Nancy Pelosi doesn't give a fuck about Medicare for all. She doesn't believe in a $15 minimum wage. If we don't get free college, pay off the $1.8 trillion in student loan debt in this country, that's no skin off of her back. If the Democratic Party said, hey, we'll allow you to give the response to the State of the Union only if you don't talk about your progressive policy substance and deliver a shitty speech full of cliches and platitudes, there were two correct responses that Stacey Abrams could have given. She should have either told them to fucking kick rocks or say, yeah, I'll do it. But when you do actually get in front of the camera and give the speech, your response is blasting the entire corrupt political establishment, including the Democratic Party that try to censor you. You just go out there and say what you actually believe in. And if they have a problem with that, well, it's too late. You already delivered the response and they can't take it back. They can't undo it. It's already on the internet. Millions of people already saw it. That would have definitely made her blacklisted among the leadership of the Democratic Party. What I feel that she doesn't understand is, fuck them. I just mentioned how Nancy Pelosi does not agree with your progressive policy priorities. She has no intention of passing them into law. In fact, they will fight you tooth and nail anytime you make any progress in trying to get these implemented into real legislation. So if you're on their bad side, that means you're doing something right. That means you're actually fighting for the people because they're damn sure not doing it. Fighting for their donors as usual. That is where you'll get all your political capital. That is where you'll get your base of support in Georgia and throughout the country. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, the entire Democratic machine's approval rating is well below 30%. 30 fucking percent. That's 3 out of 10 people in the country support the Democratic Party and the Democratic leadership. Less than that. If you want to advance your political career, and it appears that's what she was trying to do when she gave that response, those aren't the people you're going to rely on to give you support. Instead, just stick with your instincts and ferociously fight for the policy positions that you support. Those policies have the support of the overwhelming majority of the country. Getting money out of politics and ending the corruption ranks at 90% across the country, and that's including Republicans. Raising the minimum wage last check polls at 84%, again, including Republicans. Single payer is polling above 70%. Again, including Republicans and independents. So don't make the same mistake that many progressives have made in the past. You better stick with the policy positions that you think are best for the people. Because I'm telling you, if you actually believe in these policies, making nice with the Democratic Party is a dead-end road. It will be the graveyard of your political career, or at least as someone who has support among the progressive base. Because the Democrats, they will force you to make compromises just like this speech, and they will force you to become more centrist, more moderate, more establishment, all the while lowering your credibility among progressives. Because we know what you're doing. We can see you. We can see that instead of fighting the leadership of the Democratic Party, you're trying to get in bed with these corrupt corporate establishment tools. Then just like Howard Dean and many other progressives who have lost their way throughout the years, the strikes are going to start to add up against you to the point where it'll be almost impossible for you to regain credibility among the progressive base that has gotten you to where you are today. My opinion on the speech from Stacey Abrams is that this was a strike against her in the minds of progressives. This was a missed opportunity that she could have tore into Donald Trump, that she could have tore into the entire corrupt political establishment in Washington, D.C. She could have railed against the Democratic leadership that is also blocking progressive priorities. And I'm talking about Chuck Schumer, and I'm talking about Nancy Pelosi, and I'm talking about Steny Hoyer, and I'm talking about all the Democratic leadership, including Tom Perez and his whole shitty brigade that he has running the DNC. Instead, she didn't, and she just bent to the will of the Democratic leadership, and that is the exact wrong calculation to make in this type of situation.